Let me start this video off by saying I had tried to film a makeup tutorial for you guys, my first ever makeup tutorial for you guys, and wanted to share my process and how I do stuff and my little tips and tricks, but unfortunately, some of this footage was out of focus, some of it was blurry, my phone ended up overheating at times, so it stopped recording. I also ran out of phone storage space, so I couldn't actually fully complete the video in the end. And yeah, it was just a lot going on at the time that I was also not prepared for or expecting. But hey, I'm gonna get better at this. I promise yous. I promise. So hey, if you like what you see, stick with me, subscribe, like, comment, and follow along. So at the moment, I've just filled in my brows with a brow powder by Anastasia Beverly Hills as a nice base because I end up going in with more products later on them. I'm using a lighter concealer shade here just under the brow to help carve it out and add a nice bit of highlight to the brow bone because I really want them to pop. And I follow along after that using the By Terry translucent setting powder, and I swirl into that quite a bit and really just tap that over my brow bone to set that down and also add a nice powdery base for my eyeshadows to easily blend out onto a bit more. For the eyes, I start off using the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes eyeshadow palette, and I use that top left shade there, and I place that on the outer corner, running that through my crease and blowing out the inner corner as well, using this as my transitional base for my other eyeshadows to blend into easier. But unfortunately, you won't be able to see that because that's when it went all blurry and out of focus, and most of the eyeshadow tutorial was unusable. So I've left some clips in here though, just to let you guys see the behind the scenes of my frustrations. And I also want to hopefully get better at this and want to see my progress from my first video till hopefully my whatever video. But yes, I end up going in with the darker red shade to deepen it ever so slightly, and then the second darkest shade, the grey one, to add a winged outer corner as well as an inner corner-ish. And then here you can see me using the brighter shade in the palette as a highlight on the center of my eye there, as well as my brow bone. I decided to pull out the lights because I was using originally natural lighting to do the makeup look, but then the sun started to go down and I couldn't see much, so we had to do what we had to do. And I'm going in with the first shadow shade I used on my lid under the eyelid there, and really using that as a base for my other deeper shadow shades to blend into as well. I'm using the same shade on the inner corner, really wanting to buff out a bit of that harshness from that deeper grey shade there. I'm finding it hard to get that angle that I want, so I'm having to rotate my head there, as you can see. But I just want to soften that out some more, make it a little bit more blended, but also keeping that like darker cut crease shape there still. That's sort of the best way I can describe that. But I'm using also just the tips of the brush there just to blend and softly control where I want that color to go, so it's not going all over the place and going too muddy or too dark everywhere. So now I'm going in with the deepest red shade in the palette and I'm putting that closest to my lash line, and I'm really wanting to softly build up the pigment and the opacity and smoke that out into that transitional shade that we had put down first. I left the center of the inner corner underneath that grey shade there a bit more bare, but I later go in with a bit more of that red tone and bring it more into the inner corner because I really wanted the center to be more pigmented and a bit more deeper with some color. And using a little bit of that same deeper red shade just to ever so slightly add a little bit more of a red hue to the outer corner and through the crease there. Taking that same shade also through the inner corner and adding a little bit of that same deeper red shade. There's a nice little wash there. I'm taking on a flat, small brush the MAC paint pot in black track, I believe, and I'm just running that on my lash line and through my waterline. I also used it as the base for my liner on the top of my eyelid, and then I've set that later with the second darkest shade in the palette. But I'm gently now just running that back and forth, softly building up the depth into that deeper red shade. And I'm then going in with the second darkest shade in the palette again, and I'm stamping and blending that over the line I've just done on the lower lash line there, wanting to enhance the deeper shade closest to my lash line and really smoke that out into that redder shade that we had put down earlier. And this is when I went in with that deepest red shade again, and I lightly started stamping that in the center of the inner corner of the eye there, and then pulling that also through over that deepest grey shade we've put down to really soften that out also and bring back a bit more of that red to the lower lash line. I'm then taking the By Terry translucent powder on a fluffy blending brush, and I'm running that over those colours I just put down to really soften and add a nice airbrush finish to that lower lash line there. I then take a beige eyeliner by Urban Decay, and I'm running that in the center of my eye and then dragging that to the inner corner of my eye, and then I bring that a little bit as well just under the grey shadow shade there and really round out that inner corner using it as a nice base, because I end up going in with a little bit more of that pencil later on to really intensify the pigment. I'm taking that same eyeliner pencil there on a more smaller pointed brush, and I'm using that to add a little bit more of that pigment down to the inner corner there, as well as buff the edges a bit more. I'm using the point there as well to round out the inner corner some more and add a little bit more of that brighter shade as well to my upper lash line. I'm taking the pencil directly again back over that line, and I'm really wanting to just intensify the placement and add more pigment to my waterline there. And this was when I wanted to show you guys the current stage of the eyes and where we sort of needed to add a little bit more. I end up going in with a white liquid eyeliner on the back of my hand, and using that same pointed brush, I'm really just wanting to mainly emphasize the inner corner there more and really brighten it, and then lightly blend that into that beige shade that we had put down with the eyeliner in my waterline, and really making that inner corner pop against the contrast of that darker grey shade we had put down above it. I'm taking a little bit more of the brightest shade in the palette, and I'm really wanting to just lightly stamp that closest to my lash line in the center there to really make it pop and add a nice bit of highlight there. I use the other side of the brush there as well to lightly fluff out the edges and blend them into the eyeshadow. I'm then going back in with the MAC gel liner on a more thinner, flatter brush, and I'm using that to lightly stamp at the top lash line there to really intensify it and add a bit more depth to the inner corner to contrast against the white we've just put down. I'm taking again that big fluffy blending brush, and I'm using the first shade we used in the palette to really diffuse the eye on this side here, just to really wing that out a bit more, because I noticed they were a bit more uneven. So I'm just running that first shade to really add a bit more of that warmth down again. I'm then taking my eyelash curler. This is the Shiseido eyelash curler. I absolutely love it. And I'm just sort of clamping and crimping that back and forth, and as I do that, I'm also rounding up and out to add a little bit more curl to the tips there. And this was the part in the video when I realized I wasn't filming most of the first portion of this eye look in this video. So I was a bit gutted, thinking, what do I want to do? Do I want to finish this? Do I want to keep going with this? Do I want to keep trying with this? Do I want to change? Do I want to add some more stuff? I was sort of a bit all over the place. So I decided to have a bit more creative freedom, and I went in with my brow pen here, and I'm mainly using that just on the tails to elongate and really emphasize the depth of them. And unfortunately, I didn't get the filming process of me popping the glitter on the center of the eye there, but I'm using the MAC Starlit Diamond Powder in their loose glitter pots that they have there. And I've just lightly tapped that in the center because I find it just gives that nice wet sort of reflection and highlight. I'm placing the lash there just on the eye to see if I like the shape and want to go with those ones, because I also had another option I was considering, but I decided to go with those ones. And first, before I popped those lashes on, I went in with my mascara and I just coated those all evenly there on my top and lower lash line, adding a nice bit more depth and volume to them, because we had gotten a little bit of that eyeshadow and glitter through them and on them. So just adding a bit more of that color back to them before I go in with my lashes. And I'm then going in with my lash, and I'm first attaching that in the center of my eye so it has a nice bit of connection and I can get the placement where I want it a bit easier. I like a little bit more of a lifted outer corner look, so I didn't actually place the outer corner lash directly to my lash line. I actually went up a little bit higher there, so then it gives that sort of more lifted illusion. And in the inner corner, I really focus mainly on getting that to my exact lash line. I also like to take my mascara there again and add a little bit more to that outer corner to blend my lashes into the false lashes and make sure that they all are sort of like a bit more cemented to each other. And this is when I decided I want to also add individual lashes to my lower lash line, because I really wanted the lashes to be quite spidery almost, because the eye look is quite bold and heavy. I wanted the lashes to also complement that as well. And also with me, more is always more. I can always add more or do more. I'm not trying to go ever for a natural sort of look unless that's what's in mind for either a client or whoever's in front of me that I'm doing it on. But myself, I usually will go bare minimum skincare or balls to the walls. I want you to see that I'm wearing stuff on my face and fully change and transform the way I look. But this is another little tip and trick I got taught actually quite recently. Putting a little bit of the lash glue onto a pointed or flat metal spatula and then just stamp that at your lash line before you put your individuals down. It just helps the individuals tack and adhere easier to the lash line without you having to struggle. Whereas you can see here, it just attaches a lot easier. And then this was the finished look for the lashes at least. I wish I had done the lower lashes later because I hadn't actually done my concealer or other products, so I end up accidentally going on top of the lashes with a bit of that concealer there, but I end up cleaning it up. Here is me just cleaning up that glitter and any fallout from the eyeshadows. I'm going in now with my skin prep and my skincare. So I first am going in with the Charlotte Tilbury's Magic Water Cream, and I'm just putting that all down as my priming moisturizer base. This is me having a little jiggle dancing to some songs. I'm making sure I get everywhere and really hydrate the skin around the brows there. And I like to start and do the eyes for this reason, so I can clean up all the fallout and make sure everything's a bit more cleaner and sharp. This is when the thought popped back into my head, what do I want to do for the base? Do I want to go down a more, let's say, animalistic route with some leopard print patterns or something more alien-like? But Instead, I thought, you know what? Let's keep it cute and simple, and we're just going to bronze the skin up, really give it a nice bit of a glow with a nice sort of soft pink-ish beige blush to complement the red eyes. I'm then taking my By Terry, this is their CC serum in the shade Sunny Flash. I love this as a nice glowy sort of radiance booster that it gives to my skin before I put my foundation and other products down. It just makes it look so shiny and juicy and plump. Then taking that same lightest, brightest concealer shade that I used to carve out my brow bone, and I'm using that on the top to also highlight and carve out the top of my brow and my arch there. And I end up taking that same concealer shade and connecting the other eyebrow when I'm carving out the other side, because I want the center of the nose and the forehead to also be at the brightest part for when we do all the nose contour and the shading. I'm then taking the other end of my brush there and I'm using it to soften and diffuse the edge of that concealer into my forehead and my skin a little bit more. And I end up going with that same big brush down the center of the nose to really softly add a nice bit of a diffusion and a gradient from this really stark bright highlight into my contour. Because I'm going directly with that bright one first, I want to sort of have a little bit more control with it, so I'm slowly and gently and lightly using the tips of the brush to just softly blend that into the contour, because I end up going in with a little bit more concealer later to help really highlight the center of the bridge of the nose there. I'm now going on my forehead with my foundation. This is the Victoria Beckham Foundation Drops in shade number 8, I believe. I love this foundation and the formula and the finish that it leaves my skin. I cannot justify the price of it though, but I also understand it. I get it to some degree. But I decided to use that today, and I'm now going back into that highlight on the bridge there of my nose, and I really wanted to make it stand out a bit more. With your nose highlight and contour, it really is the matter of just blending, adding a little bit more, blending, adding a little bit more. This is when I videoed it quite blurry, so you don't really get to see much detail to this, but I went in with the Kevyn Aucoin cream contour on the back of my hand, and then using my brush I stamped and built up the pigment from my hairline to my temples there. I then took that same translucent powder to lightly set the lighter, brighter parts where I placed the concealer on my forehead, as well as the inner corner of my brow bone there. I then take my Charlotte Tilbury powder bronzer and I use that over the areas where I've placed and blended out that cream contour, just to really add a bit more warmth and intensify that some more. I also like to do that because I find it helps to set that cream contour down and really add a little bit more depth and pigment. And sadly, I was listening and jamming to some songs and some music that I didn't realize I hadn't filmed the lower process of my foundation and contour, but I just went in with a brighter concealer shade on the inner corner there, and then I used another one closer to the center of my face to add a nice blend into my skin tone to make it look a little bit more natural. And I've just rehydrated all those before I go in to add my blush. I've gone in and mixed the Rare Beauty shades Hope and Virtue in their liquid blushes, because I wanted my blush to have a little bit more of a pinky, sort of salmony warmth to it. And I'm taking a bit more of that shade and I'm softly rubbing that on the bridge of the nose and over the center there, because I like to have my blush be a little bit more flush through the front of my face there into my concealer. And I'm slowly and gradually building up the pigment and the gradient on that fluffy brush where I want it, so I've got a little bit more control. So I'm tapping on the back of my hand into my blush and I'm really just softly tapping and diffusing that pigment out on the cheeks there before I go in and set it with powder. I wanted to add a little bit more of a highlight to my chin there and really make that a bit more brighter and pop to complement the under eyes also. My brighter concealer shade again, and I'm using a more denser packing brush to just lightly tap in the inner corner there and a bit more closer to the lash line to really add a bit more brightness to the center of the face some more. I then took that same By Terry translucent setting powder and I used that to set all the places where I placed my concealer and all those more brighter highlighted places. Everywhere else I went in with the Charlotte Tilbury powder to use that to set everything else to make sure I kept a little bit more of my warmth there. Unfortunately, this is when my phone started to run out of storage space, so I was unable to actually finish the end of this. So sadly, if you want to see the process of the lips or just the last final touches I would have added, I may have to do this again, or maybe just do another video in general, but here's a snippet of what the final result looked like for you guys. Hope you liked, and like, subscribe, comment, let me know what I should do next, and if you guys want to even see this sort of stuff. I also do special effects, so if you want some monster stuff, let me know. I love you, see ya.